What's New 802? I'm Becca Hammond, and you're listening to Vermont Talks. Vermont Talks may include graphic or explicit content. Listener discretion is advised. I've finally crawled out of my hole and shaken off winter, and I'm recording episodes again. And I'm very, very excited to have the man, the legend, Jonny Wanzer on the show today. Let's get to it. Jonny Wanzer, I'm so excited that you came on the show today. Welcome.
Hey, thank you very much.
Jonny, you describe yourself as a comedian and a musician, and you are a YouTuber. Do you have any other titles to add to that?
Maybe political satirist. But yeah, you pretty much nailed it there. Hip-hop legend as well.
Yes. So we need to talk about that first.
Oh, and the People's Mayor. That's another one. Burlington's Boogeyman. Those are some titles that I have.
Everyday People Man.
Everyday People Man. That one's a little bit older. Haven't used that one in a while. But yeah, and I've been calling myself an anti-hero lately. So.
Ooh, I like that one.
Yeah.
Anti-hero. So Jonny has a great YouTube channel. Please go subscribe to his YouTube channel so you can understand what we're talking about. Hopefully a lot of you have already seen some of his videos because they're fantastic. We need to talk about the Old North End Anthem.
Sure.
We're going to circle back around and go into your history, but the Old North End Anthem kind of blew up. I think we would call it Vermont viral.
Yeah, I would call it that.
Yeah, Vermont viral. So it's only a few weeks old, and it's already got 30,000 views on YouTube, which is so impressive.
Yeah.
I know we hear about videos that got 1 million views, but I don't know personally anyone who's gotten a video with 1 million views on it.
Yeah.
So I think you are the person who has had the most attention online that I've ever talked to, which is incredibly impressive.
Sweet.
Yeah, so like you're a real celebrity.
Yeah, maybe on the Burlington level, but yeah.
Well, when you think about how small our population is, 30,000 views, like that's impressive.
Yeah.
Granted, I think a lot of them are people like me who watched it on repeat and now have all of the lyrics memorized.
Yep.
Someone on YouTube made the comment that the video or the song balls way harder than it needed to.
Yeah.
And it really does. The bass in that song, it's a song that you can literally just jam out to.
Yeah.
And then you realize what Jonny's saying / Donnie.
Yeah.
And it's going to just make you laugh so hard. I don't want to describe everything in it, but it very much pulls in the Vermont accent that we all know and love. And it just talks about culture in Vermont in a way that I've never seen done on the screen before. So everyone needs to check it out. How did you make that video?
Yeah, I mean, so I do my main series, right? But I have a side character, Donnie, who basically I'll just go on Instagram and I'll be like, hey, ask me a question, and then I'll answer it as Donnie. And people love that. And every time I put out a new one, like it seems to get more and more followers. And so the last one I put out, one of my best friends, Urian Hackney, plays in Rough Francis and The Armed. He called me out of the blue one day and I was at work and he was like, yo, Donnie needs a rap song. And I was like, that's a good idea. And it wasn't the first time I've gotten that request. I've definitely had some fans be like, yo, when's Donnie's rap album coming out? And even the end of Police Part 2, I want to say, I do like a little Donnie song at the end. But he called me up and he was like, yo, he has a studio downtown. Very nice, legit studio and records artists. And he was just like, yo, got a beat. Come down and we'll just write the song right then and there. And so I went there. He had the beat ready, and I just listened to it and I wrote the chorus like instantly. I was like, okay. And the thing about Donnie stuff is it comes to me very easily because I grew up in that sort of environment. So like we wrote all the lyrics to that song in like a half hour to like 45 minutes. And so I wrote the chorus and then I just literally stood behind the mic and we wanted this to sound like an actual trap song. We didn't want it to sound like a parody that sounded dated and like 5 years old, like, SNL or some bullshit would do. I just fucking hate that shit. It's like, yo, just like plug into what's going on right now. And so I listen to a lot of trap music and, Yeah, and so when he showed me that beat, he showed me a couple ones. I was like, "Yo, this is a beat right here." It kind of sounds like Eminem, but it sounds like a trap version of an Eminem beat, and like that's totally where Donnie's coming from. So
Yeah, it's a sick beat. Like you
yeah,
could. I took a minute to just listen to the audio on its own.
yeah,
Like, wow, this is a really nicely produced song
yeah.
for being something that's so hilarious.
Yeah, and so I listen to a lot of trap, and so the real thing was like, okay, I know how to do Donnie's accent really well, and so how am I gonna plug this in? But like I understand, I like know trap inflections, so I just started like going with it, and it sort of just made sense. Like after 5 minutes, I was like, oh, okay, like do the whole triplet thing here, but like I'm doing it with Donnie, and like I got to make sure that I don't lose those Vermont inflections to like the trap inflections, but like make sure that they mix well, and it came naturally. And yeah, that song was a lot of fun to do because it was basically Uriah and I just like I'm like writing it as I'm going, but he like co-produced it as well and co-wrote it, and so like he'd be like, "Yo, add like Slim Jims here, or add something about Biden right here," and it gave it that much more of a shine because he is a very smart and creative person and grew up in Jericho, and so he knows that shit too. And yeah, and we've been joking about this stuff for years. We've been friends since like '05, and yeah, it just came natural, and it was a lot of fun.
Can you say your friend's name again? And what's his studio called?
Uriah Hackney, one of the Hackney brothers. I don't know if you're around when like a band called Death blew up. They were one of the first like Afro punk.
I've heard the name. I haven't listened to any other music, though, I'll be honest.
Their story's really cool. So it was three brothers in Detroit in the mid 70s, early 70s, who like accidentally made punk rock music. And it was like proto-punk, and it was only discovered in 2009 because they quickly, like nobody liked it back then. They quickly moved on to like reggae music.
Oh, really?
But one of their sons, Julian, was at a party in LA, and somebody put on like this 45, and he recognized his dad singing or his uncle singing. I can't remember. He recognized it though, and he was like, "What is this?" And then when he looked at the sleeve, he recognized his family names in it, and it was this thing that blew up, and like many different artists that are like popular just like blew it up, and they made a documentary about it. Anyways, he's one of the kids from that, and the three sons from one of the band members made this band called Rough Francis, which basically started out as a tribute to a band called Death, but they ended up, going their own way and making their own music, and it's gotten pretty popular to the point where they had a song in the new Tony Hawk game this year, which was incredible.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I've heard people say things about the music in Tony Hawk, like,
Yeah.
"Oh, this stuff is good." Like, I like listening to the tracks in these video games better than the music on the radio lately.
Yeah. Yeah, and the thing about the Tony Hawk soundtracks, and especially with the generation that Uriah and I come from, like the Tony Hawk 1 soundtrack was a lot of our introduction to punk rock, and for him to be on the remake of those games is just like incredible, because I'm a big video game guy myself, and like I would have just bought in that game anyways, but the fact that like my friend pops up every like 45 minutes on the soundtrack it just blows my mind.
Right, it makes it pretty special.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So, Uriah, is he the one who was being Horace Wallace?
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to verify, because Horace Wallace was a great part in that video.
Yeah. Yeah, Horace is great. So, like, a lot of people don't get his character, but, like, his character he's like a failed Rick James type sort of dude who ended up, like, losing it all and moving to Vermont, and, like, his only friends are, like, Donnie and people like that. And he's kind of embarrassed about it, but, like, it's the only option that he really has for friends. And so he has all of these weird connections to the music industry, and he, like, still makes music. And so, like, he saw Donnie, and he was like, that's going to be my Eminem. I'm going to be his Dr. Dre. And so, like, he's on this whole, like, Dr. Dre thing of like making Donnie come up. And so like their first song blows up and is a hit, and he's just like, yeah, it's the Horace Wallace touch.
It's so good.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. Okay, I'm glad I asked about Horace Wallace. I
Yeah,
really needed
no,
to
shout
understand
outs to Horace. We have a whole entire lore that will be introduced in subsequent songs
Awesome.
coming out. But yeah, there's a whole universe of Donnie and Crystal and Horace. So
I could see a graphic novel in your future.
yeah, I definitely want to do something where I explain the lore at some point. But like the whole point of the album that we want to make is like you're going through this entire story of like one song happens and then the next song is a reaction to that song, and then so forth and so on. And so you just go on this journey of these fictional characters. So,
That sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
I am excited. I need to know more about Donnie. Your other song, which doesn't have quite the same feel to it.
oh, you're talking about my 2009 or 2019 thing?
Yes, Parallel Girl. It has
Yes.
been stuck. Okay, so we need to point this out. So
Okay.
you listen to the Old North End anthem,
Yep.
and that'll be stuck in your head for 5 days.
Sure.
Then you listen to Parallel Girl.
Okay.
And you're going to be like, Julie.
Okay.
It's going to be stuck in your head for a few days.
You know what's funny about that song is it's literally the same people making it. It's Uriah and I.
That makes total sense
Yeah.
to me. Dude, you guys could make an album that will blow up. Maybe more than Vermont viral.
Yeah.
New York viral.
Yeah.
Parallel Girl.
Yeah.
I love your video to that one mostly because it's just it. What are you trying to accomplish? Let's see what you said. I don't wanna
So,
say it.
fun fact about that video, it's the first video that I ever made.
Really, period.
Period. Yep. Yeah. So I wrote this entire album with Uriah, and I was like, cool, I'm going to make music videos to it. And I was trying to get somebody to make a music video for me, but everybody that I would get who was interested flaked out on me. And like, I'm a very do it yourself, learn it yourself kind of dude. And I was just like, you know what? Fuck it. Like, I have an iPhone and I'll figure something out. And so I put like a bed sheet over my closet and I was like, okay, like what can I do with this? And then I was like, oh, if I just like put a little bit of a filter on this, it looks like public access. And so I was like, oh, okay, like I can totally do like my own public access show or something like that, where it just looks like I'm on like Vermont Public Television. And
Which it does, and it's hilarious. And
Yeah.
it's such a song that I could hear being played on Vermont Public Radio.
Yeah, where they're like, yo, here's a Vermont artist. And, you know, here I am making like surfy music in Vermont.
It's so surfy, it's so poppy, and it's
Yeah.
incredible how well you did that. Like
Yeah.
the whole video is just like an ode to pop music's funny videos, kind of
Yeah.
like those hipstery shots that. And I love your commentary on it too.
Oh
like,
yeah, if you read it, yeah.
like easy to remember chorus.
Yeah. So I had this whole thing in 2019 where I kind of like reinvented my public image. I like went through this point of my life where a lot of people I knew were kind of moving on or starting families or buying houses and stuff, and like I was living with some friends in a house that they had bought in, and I kind of felt like I was always the third wheel, and it kind of made me depressed for a while. But then I kind of realized that like I'm kind of just like a different breed than that, and like I kind of feel like, you know, what I'm doing now and where I'm at now was like what I was destined to do, you know.
Right, you knew.
I didn't know necessarily that it was going to be video, but like I knew that like I wanted to entertain people, and like it was okay to be kind of like the single loner dude that is just like living by himself. And so like I did this whole thing where I was like, cool, I'm going to start over with my public image. And, you know, I changed the spelling of my last name to make it so people could pronounce it easier.
Do you want to explain that a little more?
Yeah, so my last name is Wanzer. That is my last name, but it's spelled Wanser. And this weird thing happens with people's minds where when they see it, they want to mix the S and the N up. So a lot of people say Wasner or they say Wanzer.
Yeah, well, there are, what is their name? I know Vermonters with a WAS in the start.
So that happened to me all my life, and like it annoyed me. And so I did this experiment where I experimented with different spellings of my names, and I realized when I changed the S to a Z, which is the original German spelling of it before they came over and changed their last name because, World War II and stuff like that.
Right.
When you change it to a Z, people instantly know how to say it because they think, oh, this is German. So it's Wanzer.
Right.
And they don't mess up the Z in the end. The Z stays put because it's like finite.
Right.
And so I was like, cool, I'll just go by the original spelling of my family's name. And like, it kind of looks cooler anyways. So it's always cool when there's a Z in your name, So
yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. That's why I wasn't sure if it was your name because it's too cool.
Yeah.
Especially because you don't have an H in like Jonny. That's pretty slick.
Yeah. So that is no, that's the real spelling. My full name is Jonathan, but there's no H in the John part. So when I started going by Johnny in middle school, I never included the H because it was never there.
Right. It wasn't supposed to be.
Yeah, and it's kind of symmetrical when you look at it. It's like the J goes up and the O and N is like just solid, and then the Y goes down.
Right.
So,
yeah, you can make a cool logo with that.
Yeah, I always liked that as a kid. But getting back to the other question here.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I sometimes do that. We get off on tangents.
No, I mean, yeah, it's like so much for me to explain that it's bound to happen. But I ended up doing like kind of reinventing myself, and like the main reason the video is like that and why I call out everything is like there are so many like Instagrams and social media feeds and people that you just see online that in real life that like try to come off a certain way, and it's so fucking annoying.
Oh, Insta style.
Yeah, where it's like you have this friend where like you guys have gone out to parties and like you've held their hair and they've like puked and shit, and like you've seen them shit face and like you make fun of fucking like dumb Vermont shit with them. But then you go on their Instagram and it's like they're like influencery sort of, or they have like black and white photos with fucking Edgar Allan Poe looking shit. And it's just like, dude,
I'm guilty.
Yeah, no, it's all good. It's like, it's what, like when people want to be an artist, they don't like, people want to, go big. People want to be like this huge thing that matters. And so they look to things that have been like that matters, and they try to emulate it. And for me, I have come to a point where I've learned that about people, and it annoyed the fuck out of me. And I was like, I want to be whatever the opposite of that shit is. And I kind of found out that it's just me. It's just me. And like who I am is I'm just kind of like a townie that runs his mouth a little bit. And I learned early on when I started making the videos, especially when I made like the second and third one, the Press Shopper and the U-Mall one, I was like, yo, I know what my image is going to be. I'm going to be King Townie. Like, no one wants that title. No one's going to claim it, but like...
No one's going to fight you on it.
But like, I think it's going to resonate with people and people will stand behind it, which... Voila, it worked out.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's funny we say that because in 5 years, I bet there's going to be other people trying to do what you're doing.
Yeah, and that's great. If I influence people to make content, that's great. That's like what it's all about. But yeah, I really was like, yo, this is my image. I'm just going to lean into being a townie, and I'm going to make fucking jokes about, townie stuff, and then also just funny general jokes that are just in the zeitgeist. But, focus on like, what would you joke about with a friend in Burlington? That's like that. If you want to know my formula, that's the formula.
It works out really well. Your videos are incredibly entertaining, and honestly, they're a little overwhelming because sometimes you're like, whoa, is that true? Wait, back this up, because you're just spitting facts so quick. Sometimes you clearly put a lot of effort into looking into stats and details, so you're not putting out bad information, which I thank you for doing that.
Yeah, sometimes I get like things wrong here and there, but I always try to correct it.
Yeah,
I'm only one guy.
That's a big deal. The fact that you would even remotely accept that, hey, I might have messed up, and hey, this is the actual number. Sorry,
Like I said, I'm just a townie. I messed up. I'm just one guy. I'm doing this all out of my dining room.
Right. Oh, yeah. This is why technology is so great. I'm going off on a little tangent because you can be heard by 30,000 people.
Yeah.
And you're one guy. Like, you really can have a platform without being a rich, famous person or, whatever the formula for getting famous is usually a lot of money. Mm-hmm. So I am super happy about this.
And also, I want to plug that, like, I also have the same amount of views on Facebook and Instagram. So it's more close to around 60,000 views.
No, really? Yeah. I didn't realize. Oh,
yeah.
man.
So if you look on my Facebook and my Instagram, and then you add that up with the YouTube and all of that stuff, it comes out to around 60.
That's awesome. Yeah. Congrats. That's so cool.
Not to, like, do that, but let's get the stats right here. Since I'm trying to get stats right in my videos, let's get it right in the podcast.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, so you are doing great things. Parallel Girl is hilarious.
Yep.
Is there some sort of story behind Parallel Girl?
Yeah, I make a yearly retreat to LA. Funny enough, I really enjoy LA. I mean, I really like that city, and it's funny to hear somebody say that, especially maybe me, who's like, Vermont pride and stuff, but it's always a fun place to go. And like, I know the right places to go. And so I have a lot of friends out there, and, I had a friend out there who was kind of going through some stuff, and I wanted to kind of make a song that was like, about being a friend that wanted to kind of be there for them. But since they were going through it, I couldn't be there as much as I wanted to.
Right.
And so it's more, it's all about a song where it's like me kind of expressing that and just kind of figuring out where they're at, rather than like really trying to be invasive and just kind of like hoping for the best for them. So that's kind of, it's not like the craziest song in the world, but like it was just one where I had just gotten back from LA and I was just like, oh, I kind of want to like write like a nice song for this person.
Yeah, so. It's a beautiful song. Like, it's kind of blows my mind because you go for the Old North End Anthem to that, and you're like, is this the same guy? Like, wait, hold on a minute. It is. It's really beautiful. And it's interesting that it's very surfy and poppy and LA sounding.
You know what's funny? There's a whole album of that I haven't released. And it's done.
I was going to ask about that because there's mentions of an album. Yeah. And I internet stalked you and I couldn't find it.
Yeah. I have 3 albums now, which is funny. I'm really prolific when it comes to writing music, but I always like just never release it. But it all sounds like that.
You should release
it.
What is this?
Well, I've been working on this brand, and then like when I get to a good point, I'll be like, oh, and I also do this, and then people can be like, whoa, this guy does everything. But it's more of like, no, I was doing this before I did anything with video. But so that what I mentioned earlier about kind of like reinventing myself, like. I wanted to just do this kind of like surfy garage music and kind of return to doing singer-songwriter sort of music. And so I made this whole album about like that whole concept about feeling awkward, but then kind of just owning it in the end, and not necessarily like following what everybody in my age is kind of doing. And I like named that whole entire album. It's called Old Boy. And
yes. Okay.
Yeah. And so, it's called Old Boy because I felt like I was being a boy, but like I felt very old as well. And then it kind of became like this like terrible badge that I wore proudly. I was like, nah, man, I'm living my life like an old boy, and it's also a double entendre for what you would call like Vermonters, like the old boy at the gas station talking and doing the scratchers. And so it really like, whatever it was, it really resonated with me. And I kind of wore it as like a badge of pride. And so the whole album is just kind of like me finding myself in situations where, the topic is a little bit heavy, but like I'm kind of navigating through it, and just it's basically like a becoming 30 sort of album.
What do they call our quarter life crisis? I've heard that phrase before, and I totally had one about 26, 27. I'm like, what is life?
I definitely had that at like 29.
Yeah, I think everybody does. I think that's just something that we all get to go through. Maybe it's a millennial thing. Like,
it could be.
Our generation gets to have 2 midlife crises.
Yeah, it could be that.
I really hope that's not the case. Yeah. But, okay, so when you make these albums, are you digitally, like, how are you making these?
So I am a music engineer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So
Gotcha. That makes so much sense.
yeah, so I produce most of this stuff myself. And I'm a singer-songwriter, so like in my dining room studio, half of it is dedicated to videos and then half of it is dedicated to music. And so my desk is really, it's more set up for music right now than video stuff, but it doubles as both. But yeah, so I use Pro Tools and Reason, and those are my main DAWs. But I've shifted more towards Reason these days. And so I have my own mics, all of that stuff. I've sound insulated my dining room. And I work with VSTs and have bought very expensive ones and do amateur mixing and mastering myself. Like when you listen to Parallel Girl, I mixed and mastered that myself.
Awesome.
And then, yeah, I just do it all there. And then eventually when I'll do like MIDI drums and then I bring it to Uriah's studio and then he records the drums and then does the sound engineering for drums because unfortunately, I don't think I'll ever get to a point where I'll be good with that stuff because it's a whole science of itself. But like Uriah has mastered it and he's so good at it. And so I was just like, yo, play the drums because you're great at playing drums and do the sound because you're great at that. So,
right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. Cool. So where'd you learn how to do all this?
The internet. Yeah. I mean, I've been playing guitar since I was 14 and I took some music classes in high school and then but for the most part it's just teaching myself online. Like back in the day when the internet wasn't as big, it was like looking up tabs and stuff like that.
Yes.
But then I learned how to read sheet music, but then I learned that I like hated doing all of that stuff. And I got to a point where I could just like listen to a song and then just figure it out on guitar.
Right.
Just because I was so familiar with like, oh, these chords are right here and like all of that. And yeah, and then a lot of it is just like I get really nerdy with music and you know, I used to be really pretentious with it. You know, went through my phase where I'm like indie rock is the coolest and like hardcore is the coolest and everything else fucking sucks. But then I was like, you know, when I started becoming more of a producer, I was like, there are totally merits to top 40, you know. It's like you don't have to be serious all the time with music. There's music that will play to different parts of your emotions and intelligence, and it's all about the mood and what you're trying to go for. So like with top 40 for me, a lot of it's just having fucking fun.
Yeah.
But the producer side of me is like analytic. It's like, oh, these are meant to be earworms and these are meant to be catchy. And like, what makes it catchy and like, who made this? What's their history? How did they grow up? How did they get to this? I nerd out with that shit. And I'll be like, yo, who made this Katy Perry song? I'll find out who did it. It's like a Swedish producer and they've made like a million hits for people. And then I'll be like, yo, what's that fucking guy's story? What does he use? Like, how did he learn to do that? But then I'll get into like cool indie bands that are doing like crazy things or like, you know, these days, like the main genres are like, you know, kind of garage indie or hyper pop or trap music and stuff like that. And so I go down holes of new music. And then I also will discover subgenres from old music that interests me as well. One of my biggest genres that I like is 60s rock. Yes. And so that's a big one. And then I like the subgenre of Baroque rock from that era, you know, kind of like Sgt. Pepper's sort of stuff. But then like when it gets more like Baroque-y and finding weird, obscure bands in that, that's like a really big one for me.
There was some really out there music in the 60s. That's some of the coolest stuff. I love Woodstock era rock. That's always been the coolest. I mean, the 50s had some really good rock in it too, but...
No, it wasn't until the Beatles shook it up.
I don't know. I'm so torn on that because I love original Elvis before, and my music, I had a teacher use the phrase musically castrated after he joined the army. Nothing but a hound dog, though. That's like an excellent old school rock song.
No. There's like, you know, there's a ton of artists that were crazy influential in the 50s, like Elvis and
Little Richard, right?
Little Richard, that's who I was just thinking. Yep. Yeah, Little Richard.
I don't know why I knew that, but
I mean, you got Elvis and he gave like a little bit of an edge, but like the real edge came when Little Richard came onto the scene, and he's just like, you know, doing his thing, and like, you know, you got Chuck Berry and stuff like that, and it's just like these guys were like putting the sass on rock and roll and just like making it just, so raw. And then you get like, then you come to the next era when the Beatles step in and they're just like taking it to the next level.
Exactly.
And they're starting right where those guys dropped off. So like you listen, and some of their first albums have covers of those songs on them.
Right.
And those albums are what got me into those older, like Little Richard and Chuck Berry and stuff like that. But yeah, and then just watching the whole entire Beatles story, it's just a once in a lifetime like situation with a band. They're one of my favorite bands. I'm one of those guys, and I discovered them late too, in my late 20s. But like you just watch them go from kind of a pop band, kind of like owning that pop sphere, turn into like this crazy influential band, like experimenting with Indian music, folk music, Baroque music, like, blues revival and just like new takes on that. And just, even setting up the next decade of like,
psychedelic rock. Yeah.
Psychedelic, but even setting up the next decade of classic rock for bands like Pink Floyd and Led Zeppelin to kind of take shape. And even setting up like disco acts, especially when you go to like Paul's ballads, like a lot of that stuff you could see influenced a lot of like disco things that happened later on.
Right.
But yeah.
Just out of curiosity, and we're getting off on the tangent
Sure.
because I'm really good at that.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard Piper at the Gates of Dawn, the first Pink Floyd album?
Yeah.
That's some like
Classic.
weird old school. They're so old.
Yeah.
Looking at the time frame with the Beatles,
Yeah.
it's so interesting to see how they evolved at the same time practically. And just, they were kind of like started near the same spot and then they just went in two totally different directions. But they're like cousins almost.
If you watch old interviews with Pink Floyd, they'll tell you that it's like Sgt. Pepper's Rubber Soul era that really like, they walked so Pink Floyd could run with that stuff. And like, yeah, they went different directions, but like they both did amazing things. And it's really cool to see, like influential bands inspire other influential bands. It's like, that is the stuff that I nerd out about. To get back to like how I know all this stuff, I study that and I study what people do and I study the chord progressions that they use and like the experiences that they went through. And it gives me life and it influences me to like, write something. And so like, I'll listen to, like Norwegian Wood or something. And I'll be like, man, I want to write like kind of a chill song like that. But then I'll take like a song structure from like, like a Billie Eilish song or something
Right.
like that. And I'll be like, what would happen if I turned this song into like a 60s sort of thing? Or I turned a 60s thing into a trap beat or something like that,
Right. Oh,
So-
that's how you make new music, right?
Yeah.
That's always what it's been, is just experimenting and trying new things and pulling in other flavors.
Yeah, creativity is the act of hearing something incorrectly, remembering something incorrectly. That's what it is.
I think a lot of teachers could take some lesson from that.
Yeah.
Because a lot of teachers kind of beat creativity out of kids. Like,
Yeah.
you're going to do it 1, 2, 3, 4. Hey, maybe that kid just invented something new.
Yeah, if you fuse two things together to make something new, you're essentially, we're all products of our perspective and what we've gone through. You're essentially just remembering something incorrectly. You're like, oh, I know this chord progression, but in a reggae beat, and you're just like, oh, I'm remembering that incorrectly. It's kind of funny when you like get down to the science of it, but that's just my own theory.
Cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. We could geek out about this
Yeah.
for like hours.
Yeah, no, I see all the instruments here.
Yeah, and
So I'm
I've
assuming that you play.
I love rock history too.
Yeah.
I took an amazing class at school, and I'm so lucky to have gotten to take it, where we actually listened to recordings of chain gangs from the
Oh, cool.
1900, like 1907, something like that.
That stuff's really cool.
The beats that came through from that era into R&B, and just, you can literally just hear the evolution of music
Yeah.
over time, and it was phenomenal. Anyway, so totally understand where you're coming from there.
Yeah.
But let's talk more about you.
Sure.
So, the Pit videos.
Yeah.
We need to talk about the Pit videos, because
Okay.
I've actually been asking people on this podcast, and I don't know that I asked everyone, but I tried to make a point of asking people, what do you think about the Pit? And no one
Nice.
gave me a great reaction. So, Jonny, what do you think about the Pit?
Well, maybe as the person that has influenced people to talk about the pit, maybe I'm the best person to answer.
I think you are.
Because I don't think anybody, I mean, people were talking about it before, but it's definitely hit our generation a little bit harder. I don't want to toot my own horn, but I'm going to toot my own horn.
You definitely brought it to the forefront of people's thoughts, because you see construction projects like that.
Yeah.
And you
don't
kind of
think
ignore
anything of
it. Yeah, but when you start getting into the nitty-gritty, it can be really interesting.
I think the pit is the perfect example of the neoliberalism that is ruining Burlington right now. It's like the perfect example of it. When this mall was introduced, it was introduced as a 14-story mall with quote-unquote affordable housing, and I saw so many red flags with that. One, it's introduced in like 2015 or so.
Yep.
And at that point, I was even like, a mall? What? Like, have you seen the malls that are already here? They're dying, and and they're dying across America. And like a quick Google search will show you just the trend of like how malls are just terrible, and they're not what you should be investing in. And like, you can even look at like a similar project that they did in Winooski with all of the new buildings there, and like all of the storefronts. Half those storefronts are empty. Because nobody gives a shit anymore.
And it's so much of a pain in the ass to park and do anything in that area that no one wants to deal.
Yeah. And so I was against the mall. I'm against the 14-story building because, first of all, it's a tall, ugly thing that is not going to fit the character of Burlington.
Right.
And like, I love the character of Burlington. In like, the way that I see it is it's small town New England mixed with liberal creative arts. And like when I see a gentrification architecture building like that pop up, it doesn't scream that to me at all. It screams all the shit that I hate about like New York and New Jersey and all of that shit.
You're hitting on a point that I really wanted to bring up with you, actually, because VTC is getting overrun with this shit. VTC is being destroyed and will probably go out of business because it's being run by people from Connecticut, from Massachusetts.
Yeah.
What is this? Like this is happening everywhere in Vermont. It's so upsetting.
Yeah,
anyway,
that's the thing. And like it's so they say it's going to be affordable housing, but like they were already putting condos up in there that like the waiting list was like a couple years, and they were going like between $700,000 to $1 million and more than that. And like a percentage of it was going to be affordable housing. But from what I have seen for the past 10 years of projects that have promised that, it starts out as affordable housing, right? And then it turns into a thing where it's these landlords taking advantage of Section 8 vouchers. And then when those fall through, they end up going after the people that have money, aka, you know, the tech bros around here. And I was one of those up until recently, maybe still am. But, and then it's also the college kids as well. And I went over this in my last video briefly, but it's like there is such a huge need for housing here. It's only a 1% vacancy when it should be a 3% vacancy.
Yes.
So like they can get away with jacking up these prices and really taking advantage of these people. And yeah, people... At the end of the day, people aren't looking for the goodwill of people. They're looking for the benefit of themselves. And so these affordable housings they'll eventually go to meetings and get out of this shit and then just jack up the prices. And like Bill Bissonnette is a big person in town who is the perfect example of somebody that did that.
Yeah.
He used to be all about affordable housing, and until like Section 8 vouchers, like something happened with the state, and he stopped being able to get those. And rather than him making his apartments more affordable, what he did was he renovated them, jacked up the prices, and basically kicked out 40 people within 2 years off Section 8 and into these places. And it's just like that he's not the only person that's done that. It is a trend that is happening right now.
Yes, and now that you're pointing this out, I've been recognizing this without putting my finger on it, because when I first started looking for apartments in like 2013, everything was Section 8. Yep. If you made money and you could afford a decent apartment, you couldn't find one because everything was Section 8. Yeah. And now there's very little Section 8, but everything is so expensive. It's like just at my limit of what I can afford as a single person in this area. Yeah. Like this isn't, I don't know how you fix something like this easily. There's never an easy solution to these things. But you need to point out these problems, because if we just let them slide...
The reason, it's like one of the reasons why I made the pit video and why I'm making the Slumlords Part 1 and Part 2 is because a lot of people that are affected by this are oblivious to it happening because they're in the shit and they only have time to like focus on that shit. And so like I view myself as kind of the in-between where like I'm delivering it to you on a very special plate of like, if you like fast content, like this is your thing.
Right. Social media, which is what the late 20s, early 30s people live on.
And a lot of people don't have a giant attention span. So I turn 20 to 30 minute shows into 6-minute shows. But I'm still getting out the main things that will get people engaged. And so that's like, so it's affecting all of these people, but they have no idea. And like, you just see people attack each other, where it's just like, you go on Black Market U and somebody's trying to like sublet their place that they have no control over the price. And then you have all these people pouncing on them and being like, that's so expensive, blah, blah, blah. It's the reason I don't live in Burlington anymore. And it's like, yeah, that does suck, but like, why don't we look at the bigger picture here? If you're so pissed off, why don't you be pissed off at the right people?
Right.
And that's like, that was my goal with Part 1, was to be like, to explain it, to be like, you're mad. This is why you're mad. These are the systems that are in place. These are some of the people that are involved. And here's like a couple things that we can do to make it a little bit better. Is there a perfect solution for this? Yes and no.
Right.
There is one ideally, but practically, no. Because like it's like spilling ink on your shirt, It's going to be almost impossible to get it out without some bleach. Right. And it's almost going to be impossible to get these fucking slumlords and all of these people in power out of office unless like some drastic shit happens.
We need rent control. I really don't understand why that has been... why anyone would look at rent control and say that's a bad thing. Because the apartments that they rent in Burlington, they're literally renting this new apartment. I think it's above the new Small Dog building. Yeah. This apartment was under 400 square feet. It was smaller than the living room part of my apartment. It was over $1,300.
Yeah.
Like what? A $1,300 400 square foot box.
I actually looked at a place there, so I know exactly what you're talking about. It was too expensive, and it was in one of those fucking soulless gentrification buildings, and I'm like, no hate or anything. I realize that you're living your life and you got to do your thing. But, I'm kind of like, I like those quirky New England houses, and I like New England architecture, and I like the history behind it, and I like living around it. So that's why I rep the Old North End, because it's like there are some gentrification buildings there, but for the most part, it's old school buildings.
Right. And I miss old school buildings, but my problem is they do not maintain them. So back to the pit.
So the reason it's like the perfect example of it is, all the things I just said, but also the like things that have happened with it. It was a crazy expensive project that was leased out to an out-of-state developer, one of the biggest in the country, And so like that's a huge red flag. And then also it was basically voted against by half the town and won by like a slim margin. And so a lot of us like didn't want it. I voted no against it. And and then the the developer ended up like screwing over the town with this because they ended up they underestimated how much it was going to cost to demolish the mall. And so they realized after a while that they were making more money by not doing anything there than making something. And the city really couldn't do anything about it. And, that's why we've had the pit, essentially. And it's changed developer hands and then went back to the original people. And now they've come up to like something, or they've come up with something that they're going to build now. But
it's only 4 stories now, right?
Yeah, which is a lot more like manageable, and I'm glad that it's not going to be this fucking giant eyesore anymore.
Wasn't there always a limit on height?
There is.
In Burlington to protect the waterfront view?
Yeah, damn, I can't remember the number off the top of my head.
Yeah, it was like 4 or 5, I thought, somewhere around there.
Yeah, it's something like that. And there's only one building that's grandfathered in Burlington. And do you know what it is?
Is it the Hilton, one of those?
Nope. It's the building across from Carrie's Quick Stop. I forget the name of it, but it's the old folks' home. That's the biggest. That is the tallest building in Vermont.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Because my friend is currently helping put a roof on a 10 or 12-story building out in Stowe, which kind of blew my mind. I'm like, 12 stories in Vermont?
Yeah, that building, as far as I know, unless they built something else, that is the tallest building in Vermont. There is an ordinance because we're a tourist state. You know, it's the reason why we don't have billboards or things like that. We have ordinances against this kind of shit.
Right.
And like these dudes were trying to weasel their way to like really ruin like a part of the aspect of the city that I like. And so this whole thing just represents all of the things that I just hate about like neolib centrists that just like are in it to make a fucking quick buck. And like, you know, Miro comes from that developer world. And so a lot of the people that he surrounds himself with are involved in that as well. Like he's best buddies with the Redstone guy, Eric Hofstra. Right. And he's just like a lot of people on the board in like the meetings and boards that he has for things about like rental laws and like housing stuff. It's all people that have like conflicted interests.
Right. They're making profit off
or
it.
They're married to somebody that is like one of the big owners or something like that, you know?
Yeah, serious conflict of interest.
Yeah, and like you even go to the new City Hall Park that they redesigned for no fucking reason and it almost looks the same.
Why?
If you look at the fountain, it says like one of the Pomeroy's names on it, and they're one of the biggest renters in Burlington. They own some of the most property. And so it's just like, there's just shit like that just doesn't sit with me well. And, you know, and then especially hearing stories about all of these people from Facebook when I asked for it, it just gives me more of a perspective on just like who these people are, who the mayor surrounds himself with, and the mindset that he goes into with this kind of project. And so that's why I don't like him. Right. Everything that he's changed in town has been squeaky clean, but we're not that kind of town. If you want to go do that kind of fucking architecture, go to Williston. That's where all that fucking plastic bullshit is, and they got plenty of more space for it.
And they're all for it too. They like adding on their tax base.
Are you familiar with Williston?
A bit, yeah.
Okay, you know the 5 corners right there?
Yep.
And that like fucking hellscape of a neighborhood that's like beyond it, where all the houses look the same.
Big, huge. You can't believe they put up 40 freaking buildings.
I took a drive in that neighborhood with my ex-girlfriend just to make fun of it. Like we went around, we were just like imagine living here. I would want to fucking murder myself.
Oh, and there are Section 8, aren't a bunch of those low income too. So there's like a mix of townhouses that are super gentrified and people who are not super gentrified, but they keep them in separate buildings.
There's just no character though.
Oh yeah, it's all cookie cutter.
It's nothing. And like imagine that shit aging, it's just going to look so stupid.
Oh, it's not, and they're not going to maintain it. That's the thing.
Yeah,
all of these buildings, they always, make them look good, and you really look, and it's like these are
they look nice.
Cheap,
yeah,
like insanely cheap.
But they're built out of cheap shit. And
so they definitely saved a buck or two. This isn't high end living, but they charge high end prices.
It's just I just hate that, and
me too.
Yeah, because what it does is it creates a environment of disposable houses. It's kind of like you know how like phones are disposable after 2 years and blah blah blah, but they could really make all this stuff, so they're not. Right. They're doing the same thing with housing because it's just money. So like they'll tear it down and they'll build a new one, and like some fucking dude will make money off of that in 30 years, and it's just I just hate that shit, and it's only. There's no culture in it, and it only exists because of money and greed. That's all it is.
And there's no incentive for them to update older buildings.
Yeah.
They don't need to. They can charge just as much for that old building that hasn't been maintained in 50 years as their new gentrified apartments. So, it's $1,500 to live in a building that is literally falling down.
Yeah.
Like, where's the line? Like, what is okay here?
And here's my problem with this overall. This is my final thing on the pit and all of this all together. And hopefully this was the best answer that you've ever gotten. But I don't like it because what it's going to do is change the dynamic of the town. Keep Vermont weird. That's a big thing that is cringy, but is a real thing. Vermont is weird, and Burlington especially is the poster child of that. It's very strange, but it's very different. It's very creative. It's very clean. It's very nice. But there are grimy things about it too that make it really awesome. It's all of those things in one. And when you start introducing this shit that gentrifies all of the people out, what you're gonna get is just like rich out of town people that like are fucking plastic nobodies that
use Burlington like a playground.
Yeah. You start losing character and you start losing the things that make the town awesome. And for me, maybe this is fucking pretentious or whatever, but like you're going to get a lot of fucking boring normie people that have never experienced anything real that are just moving in and like creating these fucking faux experiences, those fake Instagrams of like, I'm tortured, but like my mom like paid for everything when I was growing up. And not to say I'm against any of that shit, but like you're going to lose the struggle and you're just going to have this fucking plastic Williston town, and you're going to lose that like creative spark that makes the section cool, that makes Burlington cool.
And you're going to have no one to cook your food for you.
Yeah. It reminds me of Williamsburg, where like late 90s, early 2000s, it was like a cool artistic hub because like people that couldn't afford to live in Manhattan were living there. But then you fast forward to today and it's this fucking plastic shell of what it used to be, all gentrified, and like it has like little cupcake shops and like whatever, and it just like has the quintessential like whatever experience for you. I don't know. It just loses that edge, and like you're going to have less people like you're going to have less creative people that are like pushing the boundaries in a plastic town like that because no one's going to give a fuck. So that's why I hate it.
Great answer. There's definitely a feel to Burlington that like we have so many bands. We have so many little places where people jam out, and there's art, and there's just weird stuff, cool stuff, fun stuff. And a lot of those guys can't afford the $3,000 apartment all to themselves. So if that's all you've got, they've got to go somewhere else.
Yeah, you're going to price them out. And it's the reason why there's a problem keeping young people here. It's because they can't afford it.
Exactly. Oh, yeah, that's 100% a huge problem. Like, why? I often have questioned myself, like, why do I live here? I could make twice as much money elsewhere and pay half as much to live. I love Vermont, though. Like, there's a lot of us who just love it here that we don't want to leave, but you're making it really fucking hard to want to stay here sometimes.
Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, like a lot of people want to get out too because they want to experience cities and live that fucking hellhole life for a little while. I have a lot of friends that have done that and want to move back, but it's so expensive. And they're just like, I can't move back. And it's just like they have to get places out in the middle of nowhere or just like in small town somewhere else, Michigan or something like that. It's just...
There's a serious problem in Burlington and South Burlington where they're very out of touch with the rest of the state. And the rest of the state 100% knows that. Yeah. Everyone's pointing at Burlington like, you guys don't get Vermont.
Yeah.
And I think, honestly, it's a gentrification thing because kids in Richford get no paper. Their school system voted out getting any paper for those kids. The teachers bring paper for those kids. The teachers make no money, and they still bring paper for those kids. And in Burlington, they're qualming over, they like want to build pools for these kids. And that's the same public school system. But a poor kid in Burlington gets a way different education than a poor kid in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
Like very, very different. And that's not, like, we don't talk about that. Like, why? Yeah. And what are you going to do when suddenly everyone, the majority of the state, isn't Burlington?
Mm-hmm.
is so far behind. Like, what are we going to do? And we're starting to see where the city's just getting so rich that your chefs, your cooks, your bartenders, your college kids, unless daddy paid for it.
Nope.
Like those are going to be the kids who can stay in Burlington. Like, what's going to happen in 5 years if this keeps going on like this? Not okay. People need to think about this stuff.
Yeah, and it's hard too because a lot of the information about this stuff is delivered in ways that it's not consumable for them. And so that's kind of where I come in.
Oh, it's purposeful too. They don't want you to fully understand what's going on because then you'll question why it's happening that way.
Yeah. But that's why I do the videos. I do the videos. It's half because I'm a comedian and I like attention and I am a Leo gang. But the other half is I care about the city. I care about my friends leaving and stuff like that. And I don't want to see it change that way. There are changes that I do want to see, but not in that sense. And there's a huge progressive movement that feels the same way growing. You can even see that in the last mayoral race, we lost by 128 votes.
It was so close.
And that while that does suck, think about that. Progressive Party did that in Burlington. And that's pretty sick because like the main parties are Democratic and Republican.
And they're practically the same.
Yeah, and they're practically the same. And like that's cool. So it shows that like I got some fucking work to do in the next 3 years to get people like pissed off at this guy. And I plan on making this term a living fucking nightmare for him because I just hate everything that he does. I hate everything about him. And I just want to fucking like, I want to flip this town upside down and leave it burned after.
Just so they notice.
Yeah.
That guy.
So like, you go downtown and you see people wearing this hoodie, which I have seen a couple times now. And like the chances of the mayor seeing that is like, you know,
it's good.
It's just like all of that shit. It's just like, I want to introduce so much disruptive stuff, whether it's content or merch, or it's me doing something that like I'm highlighting in a video, which I have stuff coming up, which I don't want to give away, but think like John Oliver at the end of his episodes, if you're familiar with that, where he will do something in the real world that gets people talking. Think that. And I have some fun stuff planned.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'm very excited for it. Honestly, Miro keeps doing such things that are very, the last couple weeks, I was very much like, what? What are you thinking, dude? Like, this is not a good look for anybody.
Yeah, removing the racial equality.
Right, because of her
Jesus
race.
Christ.
Like, what the fuck?
Well, it wasn't.
I know he's claiming that, the bias.
Yeah, he wanted.
Bias.
It's just like not a good look for cis white male to do that, and like you should just, you know, I don't know. It's like.
What did
you should be aware of that.
I just don't understand what he thought.
Yeah.
Like that was a good idea.
And he waited until he won the election too to do that.
Yeah. Oh, and then there's just been so much in the news.
Yeah, and then the Kyle Dotson shit.
Yeah, that totally plagiarized report that college kids at UVM would be expelled for that.
Yeah, because he didn't think people would read it, and at the same time he's getting paid $75K for a 6-month job that is not full-time. It's like a part-time thing for him.
And he wrote a grand total of 6 or 7 pages.
Yeah, and I hate to tell you guys, but I fucking warned you. And people were trying to give me shit about that. If you listen to Black Lives Matter protests or the Burlington Park protests, they were warning us about Kyle Dotson and how he was basically a POC puppet for Miro. And like, there are some people on city council, I will not name them, that are vocally against him, that are of the progressive movement. And it's just like, it was so funny when people were trying to give me shit about that online. I was like, well, obviously you don't pay attention to the people that are saying this. Like, literally that video was all facts from Battery Park protest movement. And the point of my video was to give them a platform because all of the other news outlets around here villainized them and failed them.
Oh, yeah. It was very confusing. I mean, I kind of wish I'd been recording more then because everything got so bad last year that things just got a little nuts. But the way because it was 7 days, right? They got in a whole spat. They were burning. And
Yeah.
No one really knew why because they didn't have a platform to say why.
Yeah, and then the owner, she has a platform and she says that they're basically doing what authoritative governments do. And it's just like, no,
You're the one with the platform.
You're a piece of shit, and you're saying that to like make you're creating the narrative that you want people to see. And like that pissed me off so fucking much where I was just like, I'm starting to get a following, and I was like, no, I am going to deliver what all of the other media here has failed to do. Because like this is the right shit that needs to be out there.
Right.
And, you could say I'm like a fucking left-leaning Young Turks sort of shit. And I wouldn't necessarily say that you'd be wrong, but like even some of that left media like is a little too far for me. But I just like to stay grounded in like the left, where it's just like, here are the facts. They're literally right here. And here are the sources. And like, this is why people are being centrist and why they're taking advantage of these situations. And this is why the newspaper's doing this.
Right.
Yeah,
there was a lot to that.
They're a neoliberal publication. And I think the owner is like married to some like Democrat.
Probably in politics.
It's a Democratic politician. I forget what it is, but he was like, I didn't have to report on this, so I didn't do a lot of research on it. But I know it's like a Democratic candidate that is more of a centrist.
Right. Well, that's what they all, like Democrats at this point are just catering to the masses.
And I've been to their house because they interviewed me for a cover story like last summer, and they still haven't ran it yet, probably because I talk shit about them. But
probably.
I don't give a fuck. I'm getting views. Who gives a shit? Fuck them.
Well, that's kind of it. Is I just don't get the stifling.
Yeah.
Like, we're going to stifle you and we're not going to report on Black authors. Like, what reason could you possibly have to not run stories on Black authors? They run stories on fucking nothing. They run stories on literally someone could drop something in the street and they'd be like, you dropped this? How do you feel about that?
Yeah.
What do you think? Is it an art statement?
They have some of the dumbest shit where it's like, here's a guy from fucking Richmond that like does these little painty things in their barn and like he sells it and he's on the fucking cover, and it's like, that's cool for like 2 people. And then meanwhile, you have me that's causing a fucking ruckus in town, and they like, if they covered me, they would get so many fucking readers that would never read their shit. Right. But like they won't fucking do it because they have pride and just like they're fucking weird. Have you ever seen their coverage on Bernie? They always like roast him. They hate Bernie.
Oh yeah. Oh, I know. And so does VPR. It really pisses me off.
Like, and I get that they're trying to be fair and balanced, but they go after my man.
Yeah.
And like,
and about things that, because like I have beef with Bernie.
Yeah.
The whole the F-35 project. He couldn't give less of a crap how upset people are about that. And that bothers me. Hear me, Bernie? I'm pissed off about the airplanes. You should care about your people.
My best friend Pat McCormick is one of my best friends. He's putting out a documentary on that on the 15th.
Oh, cool. I think I saw that on like Champlain Black Market or something. Somebody posted that they were going to do that.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So I did Slumlords Part 1. Right now I'm working on Slumlords Part 2, but I am currently seeking out a lawyer to give me advice on an angle of how to go about this, because this one is all about just going into slumlords. And usually I go after public figures, which is easier to go after. Yeah. But when you go after individuals and businesses, they tend to want to sue you a little bit more. And you're not necessarily protected by a ton of different rights. I mean, you are protected, but like in terms of like suing you, it doesn't look as bad as it would for like a politician to sue me. Because if they did that, it would look bad on them.
Right.
But so I have Slumlords Part 2 in the works right now, and I'm really excited about that video because if I can do what I want to do, it's going to be fucking hilarious. And there's new stuff that I've never done on camera that I'm going to be introducing, and it's going to be, I have like 5 guest stars on it.
Ooh. Which
I have only just started doing guest stars and stuff like that. And so I got that, and then there's another Donnie song coming out. It doesn't have a name right now, but it's basically Crystal's mad that about the shit that Donnie said in the first song about her. And so it's a rap fight between Crystal and Donnie, and it's like a domestic altercation out in front.
Street.
It's at the Cherry Street bus stop. So they're basically yelling at each other about shit, about the song, about their son Corey Jr., and about like a bunch of different shit like
Their
that.
son is named Corey Jr.
Yeah, there's a story behind that too.
I was gonna say, I'm so excited.
And it's both their biological kid, but the kid's name is Corey Jr. But there's a story behind that. It's named after his dead cousin.
Right.
So
Makes sense.
Donnie had a cousin named Corey that he talks about every once in a while, but he got stabbed in jail.
Yes, I remember in the video you made homage to Corey.
Yeah. Oh no, that was Trevor.
Oh no,
yeah.
Sorry.
So Trevor was just a different friend that died. But Corey was his family member that died, and so he named his son Corey Jr. in memory of his cousin.
This is amazing.
Yeah. The lore gets so stupid like that, and it like some of it is wacky like that, but some of it's very grounded, and you're just like, oh my God, like I know someone that is like in that situation.
I could see someone in Vermont doing that.
Yeah.
I would not even really be surprised if I went out in some areas and met Corey Jr. and his dad Donnie.
Yeah. So yeah, that will probably come out. That'll come out after the next video, and that'll probably be in like May. And I want to do another music video for that one. But those are the two videos that I got coming up.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I really, really want you to release your albums.
Oh yeah, I want to do that too, but it's all about finding time. I have my hands full with this project, so it's always like when I get around to making music, it's always like, oh, I'm not working right now.
Right.
But I'm like working. It feels like the same kind of work. So yeah, it's been a little harder to find time for it, but I still write music here and there.
That's awesome. I'm so excited. You just need to build up that big following and then release your albums and they'll go viral. That'll be
the thing. I started doing videos because I wanted people to listen to my music. So like eventually, it turned into this, and this became my main thing, but eventually I will be like, oh, and I do like music too. So like, if you're interested, here's that. And I'll probably make a music video for it that ties into all of my main stuff.
Right.
So it'll give people an incentive to go listen.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You could definitely make this work.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on the show, Jonny.
Yeah. Thanks for having me here.
Thank you so much for listening to the end of the show, and a big giant thanks to Jonny for coming on the show. Check Jonny out on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, JONNYWANZER. Keep an eye out for his merchandise. He's got some cool artwork featuring the Burlington Mall Pit. You can check out the show notes for this episode at vermonttalks.com/22, and I'll have links to all of Jonny's pages and ways to get in touch with him. And that's what was new in the 802. The Vermont Talks show music was created by Jason Baker. Thank you so much, Jason, for making the music. You can check out his website at jbakervt.com.